Good evening, everybody. Welcome back. I stumbled on my own words. Good evening, everybody, and welcome back to the podcast. Um, Here's the deal. I have a large study that I had put together. A lot of notes, a lot of things, and I just don't feel like putting it all together and making one podcast because it would be rather long. I can tell you that. So we're gonna break this up into different parts. I know nobody likes a part one, part two, part. I shouldn't say nobody, but everything ends on a cliffhanger. But I'm gonna be starting with Goliath and his brother. I know that's a wow, Stephen. We went a different direction on this one. Yes, last week I'm talking about King James Bible believing women should not be preachers. Well, if you're a true King James Bible believing, you would already know that. But you can be deceived by some folks out there that think differently. But remember what I said last week with that, and I'll touch on it real quick and I'll move on. If you sound like mainstream Christianity, the Joel Osteens, kind of Copeland, if you're doing what they're doing, we got a problem. Just want to let you know that. But let's get into this. Goliath. I gotta assume most everybody who's ever read a Bible or even a kid's story knows the story of Goliath and David. They already know that story. I'm not going to rehash the whole thing, but we know Goliath was primarily known as the giant warrior that was defeated by David in the Bible, which was found in 1 Samuel 17. He was described as the champion for Philistine, or the Philistine champion from Gath. If you don't know where Gath is over in that whole, what we would consider the whole Palestinian whole situation, trying to take over Gaza. I'm not even gonna get into the whole Gaza thing right now. That's a whole different other ball game. But they were all on that area, in that coast, the coastal area. He was known for his immense size and strength. Speaking of size and strength, if you look at the cubits, his size, and so forth, he is roughly 10 feet. He's like 9 feet 9 inches or something like that. So that's how tall Goliath was. I'll tell you what, when I was a kid, when they were talking about Goliath, I just assumed he was like 30, 40 feet tall, the way they told the story in church when I was a kid. That's how I pitched it. Probably all the way into my teenage years when I realized, it don't sound right, which is not right. But that story, obviously, in 1 Samuel 17, where we start there, just emphasizes David's faith in God over Goliath's physical strength and might, which worked out well, didn't it? While the Bible itself does not provide extensive details about Goliath's family, it does mention that he had a brother named Lami, who was also a giant. Lami was mentioned in 1 Chronicles chapter 20, verse 5, where he is killed by a man named Elhanan. That's probably a name you don't hear very often because we focus on David and Goliath. I was going to say Goliath. Delilah, I think, is another woman that we'll talk about one day. Yikes! When we get to that part of the Bible. But anyways, but we don't hear about a lot about Elhanan, even though he comes from the same area as David. But getting back to Goliath, his lineage is part of a larger narrative about the ongoing conflict between the Israelites and Philistines. It really goes back. It just goes back. That's why I think it's sad that today so many people think suddenly they're going to solve the issue that has been going on for 3,000, 4,000 years since BC times. Yes, even since then. But Goliath and his brothers. So if you were in the King James Bible, right? Goliath he came down from the mountain and was defeated by David. I'm going to read 1 Chronicles 20, verse 5. And there was war again with the Philistines. Look at that. Again with the Philistines. Again with Palestine. Okay, I added that part in, but And Elhanan, the son of Jair, slew Lami, the brother of Goliath, whose spear weighed 300 shekels of brass. Shekels, that's another study I'm doing. Shekels is some silver. Talk about that down the road. A lot of people into the gold and silver these days. So am I. I focus heavily on it. I pay attention to what's going on. Heavily, maybe not the word, I don't know, but I focus on it. The verse indicates here that Goliath had a brother named Lami, which I think a lot of people don't know. I never even heard of Lami as a kid. That was never brought up. I tell you, some places just don't teach everything. But he was also a giant himself. There was three other giants as well at that point in time. So who was Lami? Like I said, he was a brother. Lami is depicted as a warrior like his brother Goliath. Now, if I remember correctly, he wasn't as tall as Goliath, but roughly the same size. And he was another one of the giants among the Philistines. Well, those Philistines had giants, I tell you what. But the mention of Lami adds to the narrative of the ongoing conflicts between the Israelites and the Philistines, showcasing the challenges faced by the Israelites throughout centuries. If you want to know more about the context or significance of Lami, put him next to Goliath and see where they came from, what they were doing. So I mentioned briefly Elhanan. Now, Elhanan was mentioned in the King James Bible. He's only in a couple of key passages. I think 2 Samuel 21:19, where it says, "And there was again a battle in Gob," and I'm not sure if it's Gob or Gob, I'm sorry, with the Philistines, where Elhanan, the son of Jair Oregim, wait for this one, a Bethlehemite, slew the brother of Goliath the Gittite, the staff of whose spear was like a weaver's beam. And then I'm going to reread again 1 Chronicles chapter 20, verse 5. And there was war again with the Philistines, and Elhanan, the son of Jair, slew Lami, the brother of Goliath, whose spear weighed 300 shekels of brass. Elhanan was a warrior along with King David. And it's amazing we don't get that, but he's from the same area. And the reason why I'm going to go back a bit here, I'm Bethlehemite. Bethlehem. Man, I think it doesn't get noticed. I don't think it gets talked about. I don't think it's pointed out. But well, you just look at these things. And who was Jair Oregim, who was mentioned in 2 Samuel chapter 21, verse 19? He was the father of Elhanan. But I know you were hoping I'd give you more information. There isn't much additional information that goes beyond him himself. You can put loose connections together and so forth, but we know where he came from, and that's Bethlehem. Because Bethlehemite refers to someone from Bethlehem, the town located in Judah. But that happens. The term is often used at that point in time or that time frame to identify individuals to relations or in relation to their place of origin. For the example I just told you, King David and Elhanan were Bethlehemites because they were from Bethlehem. It's pretty simple to understand that part of it. But I want to talk a little bit, well, it's the birthplace of David and Jesus. Just saying. Let's talk about the city of Gob for a second that was mentioned in the Bible in 2 Samuel chapter 21. Gob has often been associated with battles between the Israelites and Philistines. While there are limited details, but we can put those together when you do a little archaeological background check, so to speak, you can get things kind of put together. Even though the exact geographical location is not for sure, you can kind of pinpoint. You can kind of see that it was located in the vicinity of Gath, or even some of the other Philistine territories, but it looks like it's closer to Gath. I think that the significance of Gob primarily lies in its role as a site of warfare, which illustrates the ongoing struggles between the Israelites and all the armies. See, it keeps going on for centuries. But in the ignorance that we have today, everybody thinks they're going to solve the problem. Now, the city of Gob that was mentioned in 2 Samuel was primarily noted as a site of conflict, as I said before, between the Israelites and the Philistines. But while the text does not specifically describe Gob as a pagan city, it was a part of the region inhabited by the Philistines with their pagans. And it stands to reason they did. And the Philistines worshipped various deities, such as Dagon, and engaged in rituals and customs that were at odds with the monotheistic beliefs of Israelites. The conflicts between the Israelites and the Philistines often highlighted the cultural and religious differences between the two groups. Why do you think they keep on warring? Pagans versus God. You see? Been going on for a long, long time. Now, let's talk about the city of Gath and pagans. The city of Gath, if you don't know, I don't want to just assume everybody does know, but I don't want to assume people don't know. I don't want to talk down to anyone, but I'm going to basically give this information as if you've never heard it before. The city of Gath, as I said before, was one of the 5 major cities of the Philistines, along with which ones? Ashdod, Ashkelon, Ekron, and Gaza, or Gaza, however you want to pronounce it. It is mentioned frequently in the Bible, notably as the home of Goliath, the giant defeated by David. In the Philistine culture, the Philistines were known for, as I said previously, I think I mentioned it already, their polytheistic beliefs, worshiping such deities such as Dagon or Dagon, Baal, and Ashtaroth. Gath, as a major Philistine city at that time, would have been the center for these pagan practices, kind of like you have the Vatican is the central location for the practice of their pagan rituals. We look at the conflict with Israelites. Gath is often depicted as an adversary of Israel. The Philistines, including those from Gath, frequently engaged in battles against the Israelites, reflecting the tensions between the worship of God and the worship of multiple gods. I would say their influence, or the cultural influence, the Philistines, including those from Gath, had a significant cultural impact on the Israelites, being there. And some people got over there and back and forth, as we know through now time. Let's talk about Ashdod. I know that I'm probably speaking a little quick, but I wanted to get through this as quickly as I could. There's a lot of information I wanted to put out there connecting Goliath, and we're going to go all the way back. You're going to be amazed at in my belief, in my understanding, in my studies, I'm just one guy, where I think it really comes from the Philistines and so forth, and where the beginnings are. Ashdod. And what? Pagans. What are the key points about Ashdod and paganism? The Philistine deities. Ashdod was a center for worship of Dagon, the chief deity of the Philistines. And he was often depicted as a what? Fish god. That's why I've always had issues with the fish symbol. I've just never been comfortable with that. Just never. Oh, but Jesus drew a fish in the sand. Mm-hmm. And there are some folks that, it's no big deal. That's fine. You don't want to make it a big deal. That's what you're going to do. But I have an issue with it. I got a problem with it. A fish god, we got fish. We got the Pope. We got pharaohs. So we got emperors who got the fish hat on their heads. I don't think so. But they had temples dedicated to Dagon and other gods that were common in Ashdod, reflecting the city's polytheistic culture. And we get to what? The conflict with Israel. Again. Throughout the biblical narrative and historical narrative, Ashdod is portrayed as an adversary of the Israelites. The city is mentioned in several different places or accounts where the Philistines captured. This is a good one. Remember this one? Where the Philistines captured the Ark of the Covenant and brought it to Ashdod. What was that, in 1 Samuel? Can't remember what chapter. It was in the lower chapters. You could probably find it in the King James Bible. I'm drawing a blank at the moment. 1 Samuel, I don't know. 3, 4, 5, 6, I don't know. I can't remember. I should have wrote it down. I want to say 5. This event highlights the tension between the worship of God and the pagan practices in the Philistine cities. See? Again, God and multiple gods. God and multiple. Always at the end of it. Satan's always been in all those pagan cultures. I think prophets like Amos and Zephaniah condemned Ashdod for its idolatry and immorality. In Amos 1:8 states that God will bring judgment against Ashdod for its sins. Now let's look at the city of Ashkelon. In the city of Ashkelon, we have the same situation. We look at Philistine worship in Ashkelon. Pagans, right? Ashkelon was known for the worship of various deities, including Dagon and Ashtaroth. Ashtaroth was a goddess associated with love and war, and her worship often included rituals that were viewed negatively by the Israelites. By the way, I'll probably mention this again in a little bit, but Ashtaroth was actually connected with Baal. In the military conflicts, they had many. Obviously, Ashkelon frequently engaged in conflicts with Israelite. You see this whole area? We'll get to the whole sea people thing eventually, but you see this whole situation here? It's always been a conflict. It has been forever. They have always been pagans, pagan rituals, pagan worship, pagan against God. I mean, it's amazing that, again, the arrogance of the fact that we think we can just go and change things 3,000. You can't change it. What has been, and what will be, and God will be in control of all of it. Like I said before, prophets such as Amos and Jeremiah condemned Ashkelon, for its idolatry and its what? Immorality. In Jeremiah 47, Ashkelon is mentioned in the context of a prophecy against the Philistines, emphasizing the judgment that would come due to their pagan practices. Boy, they really don't like Israel, Jerusalem, and Bethlehem over there, do they? So, let's talk a little bit about Dagon. Well, I'm looking at the time. Well, we're only 20 minutes in. We can get some more of this in before I cut it off, and we'll continue another point in time. Probably the next one that comes out. But Dagon is an ancient deity associated with what? The fertility and grain, often linked to the Philistines in the biblical context. His worship most likely, from all that's out there, if you really trace it back with the not just a little bit of biblical narrative and historical background, but actual secular historical background, they originated in Mesopotamia, where he was initially a god of agriculture and later became associated with the sea. And then we get the sea people, don't we, eventually? They started in Babylon, but the sea people that came in over to that side through the Aegean in Greece, Aegean Sea, across the Aegean Sea from Greece. But with their Mesopotamian roots, I'm really talking fast here. Dagon's name appears in Sumerian text. Ah, so he didn't just show up all of a sudden. We began to worship in Gaza and Ashkelon and stuff. No. He worked his way over. He was also worshipped in various forms in ancient cities like Maria and Ebla, which is where? In Syria. And they were part of the what? The Babylonian Empire. That's the Philistine connection. By the time of the Philistines, Dagon had evolved into a major deity, often depicted as a fish-like figure, as I said before, and the Philistines regarded him as a god of fertility and grain, and essentially for their lifestyle. Dagon is mentioned in the Hebrew Bible, particularly in the story of Samson, and in the context of the Ark of the Covenant being captured by the Philistines. Remember when after the Ark is taken in there to the temple of Dagon, they come in and it's found overturned before the statue of Dagon? That was signifying God's superiority. He rules. What about the symbolism? Dagon's dual nature, part human, part fish. It symbolized both terrestrial and aquatic fertility, reflecting the importance of both land and sea in Philistine culture. Their origins came from land, all the way from the Babylonian side of things. They came from the sea, from Greece. And we have Greek, don't we? The knowledge of the Greeks. Gnosis or Gnosos. But there was a decline, supposedly. They often say by the time of the Roman Empire, the references to Dagon were rare. And then he became more of a mythological figure. Well, I will agree in the fact that mythology is fake, and Dagon was fake. He was not real, but there was a real worship of him, though. The Roman Empire tried to change that view, and then took on some of the aspects of that. You look at the Catholic Church today. It's still around. Mythology? Fake? Yes. Used in early religious practices in the ancient Near East? Yes. He was fake. He was in religious circles, but he was worshipped for real. Now let's look at Baal. Baal was also an ancient Near Eastern deity associated with storms, rain, and fertility. By the way, Near East back then wasn't that far. The Orient, when you see guys, scholars have Oriental studies, it's not because they're way over in China. Remember that. They're actually in the Near East. That was across the world for a lot of people then. The Near East. Although Baal has Canaanite roots, Baal name means a lowercase lord in several Semitic languages, and he was primarily worshipped as a god of storms, as I was talking about before, and also fertility. He was often depicted as a young warrior wielding a thunderbolt. Does that sound familiar to you? A thunderbolt. That's in Greek mythology as well, isn't it? And as I said before, the Philistines, the Palestinians, the Philistines came from that side, from Greece, the sea people. And now they're all in Gaza, Ashkelon. And yes, you can find Baal in the Ugaritic text that was discovered over in where? Syria. See how Syria keeps on popping up over there? That is where the Babylonian Empire, a lot of that was located in that area. I'll get into how I think Simon the Magician was your first pope, to believe it or not. Even though he was a storm god, he was believed to control rain and storms, which I find interesting because remember when Jesus calmed the sea and the wind and the rain? Could that have, I don't want to start to say, well, there's meanings behind meanings behind meanings behind meanings. Now, think about that. Jesus, God, controlled the rain and the storms, not Baal. In some myths, Baal's character shifts between a powerful warrior and a benevolent figure. And that was supposed to reflect the dual nature of storms, both destructive and life-giving. Mythological lore. But in the Hebrew Bible, Baal is frequently portrayed as a rival to God. Some of the Israelites' worship of Baal, particularly during periods of apostasy, is condemned in several, I didn't write them down, but several different biblical passages and texts. Story of Elijah and the prophets of Baal on Mount Carmel being one. But despite the opposition, the biblical opposition, Baal worship persisted somehow, still kept going among the heathen, which could be even some of the Jews. And then various forms of Baal were integrated into local purposes and local practices. And different forms of like almost regional Baals. Let's talk about the history of Ashtaroth. We're only 27 minutes in. We can do this, guys. We can get a little bit of this in. The history of Ashtaroth. It also, well, Ashtaroth, as we talked about before, was actually associated with the Canaanite goddess Asherah and the Mesopotamian goddess Ishtar, a prominent figure in ancient Near East mythology. Her worship reflects, the mythology, we have to understand, just because mythology wasn't real, it doesn't mean people didn't worship them as if they were. People worshiped them as if they were real. And she was, her worship reflected the fertility and love and war, things of that nature. The Hindus didn't create the multiple gods. It became Hindu, but it came from Babylon, Sumeria. Anywho, so Astaroth was a major deity in the ancient Canaanite pantheon. And like I said before, I think I said this before, was often worshipped alongside Baal. Astaroth was frequently depicted as a beautiful woman, sometimes riding a lion, or associated with doves. Symbolizing both love and war. Her connection to fertility made her an important figure in agricultural societies, where she was invoked for successful harvests and childbirth. When we look at the mythological context of that, we'll look at two different aspects of this. We'll look at the mythological and the biblical context. The mythological text is Astaroth and Baal. In Canaanite mythology, Astaroth was often linked with Baal. Together, they represented complementary forces of nature. Again, you have that in Greek mythology as well. You have those are connected together or working together or associated together, and some were making love to each other to create. And I didn't mean to get dirty there, but that's what they did to create things. Baal as the storm god and Astaroth as the goddess of fertility. Their union was thought to bring about the seasonal cycles essential for agriculture. I would call that hogwash. And then you have the Ugaritic, I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right, the Ugaritic text discovered in ancient Ugarit, which I said before was modern day, or was, or is modern day Syria. And they provide insights. If you look it up, you can find it on the internet and places. You can do a little digging, and they have different script texts. You can see them side by side and so forth. But they provide an insight into Astaroth's character and her role in the pantheon. They depict her, or these texts depict her, as a powerful and influential goddess. We're always worshiping women, aren't you? It's like the Roman Catholic Church, where we don't worship Mary. You sure do. You sure do. That lie is not sailing anymore. That dog don't hunt, as they say down here in the South. That is a bunch of nonsense. Everybody gets it now. People understand it more so than ever. They may not care, but they get it. Involving cosmic battles. Greek mythology. Now, when we look at the biblical context, the conflict with God in the Hebrew Bible, Astaroth, who is also referred to as Asherah, or the Queen of Heaven. Oh, gee. It's kind of like when the Catholic Church made what? Queen of Heaven, huh? Mary's the Queen of Heaven. Babylon, Sumeria, to the Philistines, to the Roman Catholic Church. All a nice little line. I'll talk about that. I might have already done a video, actually, about that a while back. Actually, I think I did. I'm not sure, but I think I did. But she is mentioned in the context of the Israelites' struggle against idolatry. The worship Astaroth is condemned, and her altars are often destroyed in efforts to purify worship practices. 1 Kings, I think, talks about that as well. But, despite biblical condemnation, Astaroth's influence persisted, and her worship blended with local practices. When I tell you before, they blended them. That's all they do. It's like the Roman Empire and the Roman Catholic Church are the same thing. They just blended. That's what they do. They blend, so you don't quite see it. You think there's something there, but you're not quite sure. Now I'm 33 minutes into this, and I think I'm going to end it here because we're going to go on the next one to talk a little bit about the Babylonians and where they had possibly gone after their decline. And again, wasn't a huge decline, but there was a decline, but some had gone to different places because their influences, and we'll talk about the next one, really influenced the Greeks and the Romans and Islam. And who was always against scriptures? You know, the Greeks with the knowledge, must have knowledge. Romans with wanting to destroy everything, want their multiple gods, then became the Roman Empire. And then Islam, who also hates Christianity or hates the Bible. But we're going to talk about that in another episode. All right, well, I appreciate you tuning in this evening. It's only 35 minutes. Last time it was almost an hour. We're going to try to keep these as short as we possibly can. Thank you for listening tonight. I do appreciate it. I don't just say that lightly. I am incredibly grateful, and I am very thankful, and I appreciate the fact that you take your time to listen to these podcasts, and I appreciate it. Maybe down the road I will no longer be on YouTube, and I will be on just podcast channels. I don't know, because I might just do live streams. I'm always every week I don't know which way I'm going sometimes. I'm like, I want to streamline things, but I think podcasts are a lot easier for this type of information for people to listen to. But we'll get the live stream up this month as well. So, all right, with that, I say God bless and have a beautiful evening. Goodbye.